Well, this time to London, where a video has now emerged of the London Bridge attacker, the jihadi Khuram Butt. It has now gone viral. It shows him dancing at a wedding not too long ago. It has also revived and perhaps asked the million-dollar question, what made him turn to the Islamic State? Mandy Clark reports.
Hard to believe that this is the same man who, along with two others, went on a stabbing spree on London Bridge last week. 4 years ago, Khuram Butt was dancing at his sister's wedding. Reports referred to him as a regular guy. So what happened? How Khuram Butt turned jihadi. His friends say he was inspired by watching YouTube videos. He became a strong supporter of the Islamic State, but went on to study Islamic texts and talked of wanting to travel to Syria to fight. Many in the Muslim community are fighting back to prevent radicalization and get the message that acts of terror are un-Islamic.
It emphasizes this greatly in its scripture. So if any particular person thinks that they're carrying out the work of God, or they are shouting, this is in the name of Allah, or this is for the sake of Allah, then they have so greatly misunderstood the teachings of Islam. Every Muslim has two obligations. One is to serve God, and the second fundamental obligation upon any Muslim is to serve the creation of God. You can't love the Creator and not love the creation.
But radicalization is reality here. Counterterrorism police admit they may be groping in the dark when it comes to identifying such people.
But we're working hard, very hard, with the communities and the security services, both here and overseas, to disrupt plots. But I do feel we are in unprecedented times at the moment.
It hasn't helped that police feel overwhelmed with the sheer number of cases they have to track.
Presently, we have well over 500 live investigations where we are tracking people and trying to understand the threat that they pose to all of us. And of course, more recently, we have disrupted 18 plots over the last 3 years, 5 of which have been within the last few months alone.
At this point, police are not sure if the Pakistani-born but British-raised Butt had direct links to the Islamic State, or were YouTube videos and the internet his sole point of inspiration and communication. In London, Mandy Clark, WION.
All right, let's go straight to London now. We have WION's Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, joining us to get perspective on this story. Mandy, thanks for joining us. Firstly, let me read you some of these headlines. You may have seen them already. The Sun, the Telegraph, talking about the terrorist Khuram Butt was trying to get a job with a Wimbledon security firm. Also, that the attackers may have planned to have taken hostages. I mean, you look at that video and you see him dancing just like anybody, and then this happens in London. Really hard to believe. What were you picking up from your sources there?
Well, it's that radicalization is very possible to any vulnerable group. So specifically, they're looking at people who are disconnected with the community, and that's particularly coming at the lower income and people that have new immigrants. And we see that a lot in communities that are not integrating. So integration is a big talking point now. And when people don't integrate, they feel isolated. They're more vulnerable to these ideas of radicalizations and making them more powerful. A lot of these people who become terrorists don't have a sense of loss of power. So this is the way they can make them felt on the world stage. So the big focus for police is really trying to get to the heart of that community and bring them within the British culture, and we're seeing it in the Muslim community, but specifically in the lower income, where they are just not integrating and not learning English. That's another big problem. There's such a lack of integration that they don't even speak the local language.
All right, Mandy, also wanted to ask you with regard to this. We know he was from Pakistan. He was born there. He migrated with his family later on to the UK. How does this sort of, put the perspective about the UK perhaps being too liberal, allowing, mosques and temples and all sorts of other institutions? Did they get it wrong? Seeing things like this, is there going to be more stricter measures the UK will take now when dealing with Pakistan, knowing that there was a Pakistani British-born citizen who was radicalized?
Well, Yes, I think the security service are quick to admit that they haven't been following that community as tightly as they should. They don't have enough informants in that community, greater understanding of what was happening in those mosques. You know, just a few years back, there was radical ideas that were happening in Muslim schools. So you can have faith schools here, there's Muslim schools, and especially around the Birmingham area, there's radical ideas that were being spread by teachers. So the government recognized that's a failing, that they weren't listening to what was being taught at their own schools. And now there is a much greater push to get informants, essentially spies who are British born but from the Pakistani community, to give the wider spy agency, the intelligence agency, an idea of what is happening within those mosques. So there is a disconnect even from the spy agency understanding what's happening in their own community. As with regards to Pakistan, Britain has saying is working closely with its allies. We can only understand that they're investigating these terror networks, but we're not getting a lot of detail how Britain is working together with Pakistan to really take down these terror networks.
All right, I also wanted to ask you another interesting question. The Daily Mirror, in fact, reporting that the suspect's sister and the sister's husband, Halima Butt and Usman Dur, they've now been suspended. They work at security at Heathrow Airport there in London. They've been suspended as a precautionary measure, but authorities say there really is no evidence or suggestion that they've done anything wrong. Certainly situations like this do evoke the sense of Islamophobia, hate crimes, racist attacks. We saw the London mayor, in fact, putting out a statement not too long ago. How has the mood been like with regard to that, given that there have been 3 terror attacks on UK soil just this year, not even 6 months?
Yeah, you know, guilt by association is not fair. You know, whether if someone's family member commits a crime, it's not that person's fault. But we're seeing a heightened level of Islamophobia. I was speaking to an imam earlier today, and he said he had stopped his vehicle to let someone walk by, and the person said, "I'm not going to walk in front of you in that car," implying that he was going to strike him with that car. So we are seeing a high level of Islamophobia. People don't understand why these attacks are occurring. They understand that it's been radical Islam, but they're not really differentiating between radical Islam and the moderate Muslims. So it is a big problem of understanding what is going on among the general British population, and we are seeing a lot of fear among that population, among regular Muslims. So it only is causing further divisions in the communities.
With regard to some of the further division that you mentioned as well, you know, we've seen a host of situations, the making. Are there certain characteristics that you've perhaps been able to talk to with security officials when it comes to this? Are there certain signs with regards to any of these attackers or any of those who are radicalized, perhaps by their family members, their friends? A lot of people say the internet is an open playground for them to perhaps engage in these ideologies and perhaps be brainwashed. What are some of the security officials there talking about? How are they preventing this, or what are some of the warning signs or the key signs before someone perhaps turns and becomes radicalized?
Well, there's no one set of key signs, but one of the main markers they are seeing is people who are sociable and friendly, that before mixed with communities start to withdraw. They start to step away from those close connections they used to have. They talk, they change their habit and speak very negatively about the main community. But really it's the withdrawal from the rest of the community is a key marker that people are noticing. But it's really the best help that the police are getting are signs from family members, from the community, when they notice people suddenly acting strangely or talking with support of radical groups. That is how they're going to find the terrorists, because it seems like in most cases, family members, friends have highlighted to security officials that they think there's something wrong, that their friend or family member is becoming radicalized. So we are getting information from the public, from their close friends, that they are exhibiting signs that are not normal. Their behavior has changed.
Unfortunately, in situations like this, as we talked about, people who are innocent, people who have nothing to do with the crime are unfortunately targeted, whether it's Sikhs, whether it's Indians, whether it's other minority groups there. Has there been any sort of retaliation since any of these attacks, the Westminster one, the Manchester one, or the most recent London Bridge and Borough Market attacks? Has there been more of a sense of isolation in terms of the immigrant community there, or are faiths sort of coming in together? We heard about the mosques and the gurudwaras opening up their doors. What's the scene like there?
It's both, actually. So faith groups are coming together trying to fight this radicalization, but there is, after every attack, we've noticed a spike in hate crimes. These are people who don't understand what's going on but want to lash out and backlash and to retaliate against what's happening. And mosques have been attacked, really. And just general, a lot of it has been name-calling or telling people to go back to their country, but it's still a hate crime when a 7-year-old was told she was a bomber and she had to ask her daddy what that meant. That is disturbing. She happened to be a Muslim, and it was the day after the Manchester bombing. So yes, of course, there is hate crimes that spike, and then there's other kind of more level-headed members of the community who are really trying to discourage this knee-jerk reaction and get the communities working together to fight those small radical elements that are not the majority of Muslims in Britain.
And Mandy, why is it specifically that it's a lot of the youth that are getting radicalized? It's not just the UK, it's not London or Manchester, it's Paris, it's Brussels, it's Nice, it's Berlin. We've seen so many over the last few years. Why is there such an increase all of a sudden with radicalization? You know, why are there more and more young people perhaps switching sides? And specifically in Europe, we don't really see as much perhaps in other parts of the world, not to say that it's not happening, but we see certainly a lot more cases where they've been successful, at least in implementing their jihadist terrorist attack.
Well, there's a lot of factors that could contribute to this. I spoke to a security expert, so this is kind of from that background. The numbers of Muslims in Europe are much greater than, let's say, the United States, but it's also the level of education and prosperity. So a lot of these people don't feel like their life is going to go anywhere. There's a feeling of lack of education, not integrating in society, and perhaps there is a level of racism in getting jobs or not exceeding in jobs. So when they feel outside of society and cannot contribute or excel in this society, they are looking for other ways. They do not feel a part of that culture. That is the resounding sentiment that I've heard from security forces, why these people feel like, okay, if you don't want me, fine, I'm going to go somewhere else. Like, that is the resounding sense why there are so many young Muslims in Europe getting radicalized. It's also the sheer number of them. Most of them, as we should really emphasize, are law-abiding and contribute to society and are integral to the fabric of society. It's a small number who do feel isolated, they're vulnerable, they might have low self-confidence, they tend to be from a lower economic background and don't have a level of education. So those are kind of what we've seen in the past of who tends to get radicalized.
All right, and really quickly, sort of the big picture, Europe dealing with a lot of terror, the UK specifically dealing with a leadership change as it evolves with Brexit, uncertain of who its next leader will be. Theresa May, in fact, recently also talking about the attack, saying, perhaps technology companies need to do more, whether it's WhatsApp or social media sites, to monitor and prevent situations like this. Of course, the internet, the online arena becoming a haven for terrorists to plan and read about jihadist ideologies and things like that. Certainly, that's going to be a huge agenda item for the next UK leader, no matter who that is, when it comes to dealing and thwarting the slew of terror attacks.
Yes, and that's a really important other element to this rise in radicalization, that you can get radicalized in your own bedroom, that there is so much access to radical material. You don't have to go and see a hate preacher. They can come in your space, and the level of messaging is so sophisticated among the terror groups. It certainly is something, as you pointed out, that Prime Minister Theresa May really wants to hit upon. Tech companies are quite hesitant to start adding blocking freedom of speech and giving government access. So this has become a fault line between the government and big tech companies about controlling that messaging, but certainly it's something that the current government really wants to clamp down on, because they feel like that is one of the key drivers into the increased levels of radicalization.
All right, thank you so much, Mandy Clark, getting us the very latest on the making of a terrorist from the UK.